Good morning to everybody. And we're talking about the function that PIRB has started to include within its system, that being the registration of companies. So we'll look at, this is just an overview, guys. It's going to be a short little sweet presentation, 20 minutes. It's just an overview. So we'll look at the 3 phases of rollout, because the rollout's going to occur in 3 phases. And then this webinar, or this session, we'll look at a more detailed look at the first phase. So the first phase is imminent. It's going to happen, it's happening already. And then we'll look at the other 2 as well, but we'll just touch on them and see what they do. We will look in more detail on phase 1. So the first phase, which we'll expand on a little bit later, is the ability for a company to register itself on the PIRB database and to enable the initial phase of the search function. Now, don't worry too much. We'll get into it a little bit later. You'll understand what that means. So first phase is just registration. So let's get dip our toes into the water, so to speak, and then the search function will become enabled. What is the search function? We'll get there in a minute. So the second phase, which we're not into yet, but I'm just going to mention it, is the performance ratings of the company, which is going to incorporate things like CPD, amongst others, will filter in and determine the results of the search function, right? So again, we're not going to worry too much about the details. I think it'll become clearer in a couple of minutes' time. So phase 2 is we introduce a couple of other factors which will influence the outcome of the search, okay? The third phase is exactly the same as phase 2, except for the fact that eventually what is going to start to happen is that the auditing matrix, in other words, all the results and the positives and so on from the auditing processes for the registered plumbers themselves, filter back into the result and the search function. So that will then also become incorporated into the results of the search function. So it all goes back to what I keep on saying is the search function, right? Which is the ability for a Mrs. Jones to search for a company within the PIRB's website. So let's just take 3-4 steps back and look at how this came about and why it's being implemented and what it actually is. So the PIRB a number of years ago, I think, realized that the key market that they should be focusing towards in terms of advertising and awareness is the consumer. However, even though that was identified, the fact is that to market to the consumer is an incredibly expensive thing to do, because we're talking about 64 million people, ears or eyes being reached, right? As opposed to a couple of thousand when you look at the population of plumbers in the country versus the population of the country. So that's an incredibly expensive thing to do. So hence, it's not something, well, it's not just expense, but there's all kinds of other factors as well. But having said all that, the PIRB now realizes that, well, has realized and has decided to go onto a consumer-focused campaign. And this is part of it, because we realize that consumers don't necessarily search for plumbers. When my geyser bursts, I'm not going to go and search for Richard Bailey. I'm going to search for, I don't know, a company, right? I interact with ABC 123 plumbers. I don't interact with Richard Bailey so much, because that is the way that we interact with businesses. So how does the PIRB get the company's names out there and searchable and findable to Mrs. Jones? And this is part of that whole drive. So the consumer now can search for companies as opposed to individuals, which is it's not a replacement of being able to search for individuals. It's an added layer of searchability, if I can put it that way. So the registration of companies in no way will affect the individual registered plumber. Nothing changes for myself, for yourself. Nothing changes. It is exactly the same experience you as a registered plumber has with PIRB as you've always had. So the only thing that changes is that there is an ability for a company to add itself onto the database as well. So companies are encouraged to update their details. So if a client, for example, search for a leak detector or a drain cleaner or a whatever specialization, it will be included in the search results. So what does this enable the company to actually do over and above what it can do now? Well, it is able to purchase and allocate the COCs on behalf of its registered plumbers. Or, well, if the owner himself is a registered plumber, that's fine. You can purchase and the fact is, if you're a larger company, you can buy 20 or 30 COCs and then allocate them to your registered plumbers. Those COCs still are the sole responsibility, etc., of the registered plumbers. It doesn't absolve the plumber of any responsibility. It's just a mechanism by which the company is able to track and keep track of the sort of allocation, who's doing what, what's where, and what's being allocated where. The company can also monitor the status of all the employed registered plumbers. In other words, have a look and see where he is with the COCs. Has he issued many? Has he logged them? What's the audit / refix statuses of his audits, if any? What's his CPD standings and activities? One thing it cannot do, though, and this again is coming back to the responsibility of the registered plumber staying as is that the company cannot log the COC. That remains the function of the plumber themselves. So if you take a step back and look at it, so the company is able to remove part of the burden, right, of the plumber having to now go and find and purchase COCs, and then it just simplifies it. So if you can imagine, the plumber now within a company in the past was forced to not only purchase but fill out and log and everything, the COC. Now he can actually just be allocated it from the company and do it that way. So it removes a part of the burden, and it also allows for traceability for the company, as I said. So it doesn't change anything with the registered plumber at all. You can still, it doesn't remove from you, even though what I've just said is the company can purchase and allocate. It doesn't mean that you as the plumber are now not able to do that anymore. No, you can, it's still your prerogative. So you can absolutely purchase, log, issue your COCs as you used to. So there's no difference in your sort of function whatsoever. Another thing to recognize about the registration is it's free. There is no cost to it. It's simply a matter of updating your profile as a company. That's all. It's just a matter of updating a profile. And it's not only free, but as you'll see in a minute, but it's voluntary as well. It's not a compulsory thing. If when you are trying to register and register your company, you run into difficulties, the PIRB is there to help and support with any kind of assistance that you might require, whether it's logistical assistance or details that you're not quite sure of what's filling. Please, they are completely open to providing as much support as necessary. And then I want to clarify on what I spoke about earlier about the search function. Are you asking, well, I'm sure in your minds you were saying, well, okay, certain factors are going to be included in the search function in order to change the search results. What do I mean by that? Well, the first phase, which is imminent, the search results will simply be alphabetical. So 1, 2, 3 ABC plumbers will come up before 5, 6, 7 DEF plumbers. And it's as simple as that. But later on, as I say, as phase 2 and 3 start to roll out, the performance of the company, you call it performance for want of a better description, but I mean the activities of the company, and by the company I mean the activities of the registered plumbers within that company on an average are going to start to affect the hierarchy as to where the companies are spat out in the search function. So if we had a percentage of 80% pass percentage of all the audits done on our plumbers, we will rank pretty highly. If we have a 90% failure rate and nobody's done their refixes, we will not rank so highly. Probably the most important thing is, of course, that it's a voluntary thing. Okay, it's voluntary. It's not compulsory. You don't have to do it. It's use it, don't use it kind of a thing. Steve, I was having a chat with you offline, and I mean, you mentioned it. You know, it's if I'm running a business, I would much rather have my irons in more than one fire than in terms of being out there and being exposed to searchability, rather than just, you know, and I mean, it is basically a free ability for or another avenue that Mrs. Jones can search for me and find me, certainly within my specialization as well. So, but it's not compulsory. You don't actually have to do it at all. And it's free. So it's not something that you're being forced to do. But it is certainly an added layer of visibility. And especially if the registered plumbers, you know, the guys on the ground are doing well. You know, they're doing what they're supposed to. They're logging their stuff and they're passing their audits and they're doing the refixes if they don't. And it's all positive stuff, you know. So, and that starts to, and keeping up the CPD, and that starts to work its way in to the search results as well. Steve, as always, I sound like a broken record, and I carry on and on and on. I know that you mentioned to me you just wanted to chat, well, say something about. I don't know if you want me to touch on the subject of whether or not it's encroaching on the IOPSA, because there's a perception out there that there's an encroachment of the function now of the PIRB, and they're encroaching into IOPSA territory with registering companies, and that's absolutely not the case. So the fact is, the only thing that this company registration is going to do for companies within the PIRB sphere is allow for searchability. It has zero other benefits, none. There's not going to be any of the training. There's not going to be any of the meetings. It's none of those benefits whatsoever that IOPSA bring to you. So please don't think that this is in any way, shape, or form a duplicate or an alternative to IOPSA membership. It's not. It is not the same thing at all, and it doesn't step on any toes either way. So and I'm hoping that as these phases start to roll out and the functionality becomes clearer, that perception will be put to bed. Another key point is that although because you see in the past. Well, not in the past, still currently, I as a company, for example, can't display the PIRB logo on my bucky, okay? Because then anybody can, and it means that the person that's driving that bucky on that day might or might not be a PIRB registered plumber. So it becomes a little bit of an unfair situation. So there isn't, you shouldn't be displaying PIRB logos on the buckies. However, if you register your company, there is a different insignia that will be provided, and that can be displayed. It's not going to say, well, it's not going to be exactly the same as the current insignia, but it's going to be a different one specific to the fact that the company's now been registered with the PIRB as a search function. So that is something that you would be able to use as marketing, as advertising per se. And that's that. So, Steve, I'm not sure if you want to add anything
yeah, Richard. Morning. Yeah, I think you've covered, you know, the gist of where it is, and again, just to emphasize the fact that this is not an opposition to IOPSA. PIRB is not trying to replace IOPSA in any form or means. I think the key thing that's come out of it is that those licensed plumbers and those individuals that have their own companies, maybe the guy is the only guy in the company, he's registered, is to be able to put another iron in the fire in order to go to that search engine We see a lot of communications coming through from people where they can't identify whether the individual is licensed or not. And it again just comes back to that simplicity of being able to register. And again, as you said, it's a voluntary thing. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. If you don't want to participate in it and continue as you are, that is fine. But again, it's just another search engine. And if I had a plumbing business, I think, whether you be on the IOPSA database in terms of their search for a plumber or another one, again, an added benefit to the company in terms of marketing. And again, coming back from companies, as you said earlier, a lot of companies have had the Plumbing Industry Registration Board stickers on their van, which, as you've said, doesn't necessarily mean that the individual that is there or all the individuals are actually licensed. So these have been questions that have been raised over the last couple of years in terms of, why is there no link between the two? So again, it's about listening. It's about looking at a means in which to be able to focus and deliver in terms of the questions that have been asked. And I think the board have been, working on this for some time. And again, it's just to register your company, the search engine is there, and it basically just gives an added benefit to the company in terms of that it's been checked, the plumbers that are working within that environment are licensed. And where it comes from insurance companies or wherever that ask that question. And again, it's just to be able to facilitate that. So just to emphasize, if you're an IOPSA member, as an example, all of the benefits that you continue to have, you're not going to get if you register with the PIRB as your company, other than the marketability of your company and just the link between the two to make it easier. As you said earlier, some companies have got to transfer the money to the licensed plumber to be able to purchase the COCs. Some of the companies don't even know, for example, that there's a couple of refixes that have come through because it's directly through to the licensed plumber. So again, it's just, closing the loop a little bit to make it better in terms of facilitating queries and issues that come through, but certainly not to replace IOPSA at all. It's just an added benefit to those companies that choose to register.
And another thing that starts to happen, Steve, and I'm sure most of us will start to see this, is that the companies become a little bit more invested, don't they, in the performance of the individual registered plumbers and licensed plumbers. So in the past, the onus was 100% squarely on the shoulders of the licensed plumber to perform. In other words, to have to pass refit. No, you don't have to pass the audits. You can, of course, you can fail and you just do the refix. But what I'm saying is that that rested squarely on the shoulders of the plumber. And sometimes, and we've come across it often, I certainly have, is that plumber is boxed into a corner by his employer, and his employer is saying, well, no, you're not going to go ahead and do this. I'm not going to allow you to do that. And if it, but the poor plumber has to carry the can in terms of having to explain to the auditor why this and that wasn't done. In this case now, I think there's going to be an investment from the company side into the performance of the plumbers, and that, I mean, that's all positive. I mean, surely that should be the way it must. It's supposed to have been from the beginning, So I think it really does allow for that process to really start to gel. The cooperation between the plumber itself and the owner, because a lot of the owners aren't licensed plumbers as well. So now they start to become invested in that process as well, which is a good thing.
I think also on that, Richard, as well, as you said earlier, it won't be the first or the last time that we find that a plumber is in that corner, or alternatively, the company is in the dark with regards to, refixes outstanding or whatever the case may be, So it's only at the death, when all of a sudden they can't, get a COC, because we know that some plumbers are employed specifically so that they can issue those COCs. So those challenges do come up. And I think that, companies and employees and licensed plumbers, we're all in the same boat together, all want to row in the same direction. And I think it's just a manner in terms of being able to communicate a little bit better, to make systems easier in terms of purchasing, logging, etc. But as you said, that logging, still lies in the domain of the licensed plumber. It cannot be taken away from that individual. So again, I think the emphasis, there'll be a lot more that we'll be debating and discussing on this. We're going to have some learning curves in terms of problems that we may or may not have thought of. And again, it comes back from those attendees here today. If there's any positive or negative feedback in terms of that, well then, so be it. Without your voice, coming in, then we're not going to make it better and more user-friendly, if we want to call it that. So I think the key thing is it's a positive. And again, just to reiterate, this is not, please don't go out there now and say you attended a webinar this morning and PIRB are in competition to IOPSA. That is not the case. The mandate of PIRB remains the same. It's just an added bolt on in terms of trying to facilitate between the licensed plumber and the companies and be able to get that search engine going so that the consumer, and that's where the focus is going to be from the PIRB side, as you said earlier, is that, we've done a hell of a lot. We need to get our ducks in a row with regards to the consumer and creating that awareness. As you get, Richard, and I get, and most of our compliance auditors get, IOPSA, is that communication from the consumer saying, well, how do I search if the company employs these individuals I had to get my certificate from? How do we go about that? And that's where this identification comes through in terms of the insignia or whatever you want to call it that's going to be provided to those companies to be able to better serve the consumer.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think there's, as I said, as any new concept being introduced, I think there's going to be a period of sort of discovery, right? And ironing out, as you said, the voices and the feedback is vitally important. I don't think that anything can be made to improve if you don't get feedback and you don't get sort of ideas from externally. So absolutely, it'll be the shape of it will morph and change accordingly going forward. And the end goal though remains the same. It's improving the system. It's improving the availability and accessibility. It's just a positive. So I don't think that, well, hopefully that the confusion, or if there is any, sort of doesn't perpetuate, and we'll be able to just see it roll out smoothly. The next, by the way, the rollout phases will probably be roughly, now don't quote me on this, but roughly 3 months apart. So if we're now touching June, so the next one will be in 3 months, and the next one 3 months after that. So that's sort of the time frame that we're looking at. It's not going to be a 6-year process. It's going to be quite a rapid process. So again, just it's free, it's voluntary, it's not a compulsory thing at all. There's no obligation to do it whatsoever. So that's it. Karim, I'm hoping that there are some questions. I know we've got 5 minutes left, but so I'm hoping to be able to fill that with some questions if there are any. While you're doing that, just as you can see on the screen there, on behalf of the PIRB, not for no other reason except for the continued support that we continue to enjoy. A big thank you to all of those guys out there that are in fact continuing to support and that help us to improve and make it a successful and something that we can be proud of as a professional body. So thanks very much for that. On behalf of the PIRB.